judges were so slow. So I wanted to welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Once again, look around, see how lucky we are to be here together and to have a common interest in the Collie. I want you to notice this photo that's up here. Last month, we lost someone who was really important to this organization and to the breed as a whole, and that's Kathy Peters. In the photo, Kathy is holding the AKC Sportsmanship Award. And the amount of work that she did for this breed for 40 years is just incredible, and some people are not aware of how much she did for us. For several decades, she was one of John Honig's assistants when he was the president and the secretary. And they were such an efficient team, those of us who remember, well, we all are 25-year members. So she worked on that, and she built and maintained the CC of A film library. So if you wanted to rent a film of a national or of a seminar, or if you wanted to get some footage of your dog at a national, you could contact her and she would send it to you. She also she transferred all the old VHS films that were disintegrating to DVD for posterity. And she handled all the sales and rentals of the films to clubs and individuals. Over the years, she filmed numerous seminars and breeder interviews, including the Honigs, Billy Aschenbrenner, Judy Evans, to name just a few. She used her own money to buy filming and video equipment and paid for the rights to music that she included in her final products. You've seen, we had John Honig's video here with the music at the end. That was something that she did and took great pride in. She was also the presenter at the Quarter Century Hall of Fame induction of Grace Christie and Billy Aschenbrenner. She was a member of the commemorative Collie Stamp Committee, if you remember that. And she, with her close friend Dana Rodman, a CCVA member and an accomplished artist, they were responsible for creating the cartoons. How many of you remember them? It was Dollface and Shadow, the two collies that were in all the publications, and they generated interest in the Collie stamp, which, how many of you remember that? Which became a reality in 1986. He worked with Paige Elliott in making the Collie Gate film. It was during this project that she met filmmaker Paul Beck. This man was so impressed with her enthusiasm and commitment to the Collie. And he was a professional filmmaker. And for decades, he worked with her and encouraged her. And he really is responsible for a lot of the finished products that she did. So, Paul wrote The CC of A will not see the likes of anyone else who will be able to do what she did all on her own. Thank you seems inadequate, Kathy. So we love you and we miss you. Thanks. So I'd like to welcome any new members. Are there any new members? Please stand up. I'm not going to make you speak, just stand up. Welcome. I also wanted to thank all the people that have worked to make this evening possible. I'm not going to name all of you because I know I might forget someone. But thanks, guys. This has been great. Next year we're going to be in Peoria. How many of you remember what a great ballroom that was and what a fine time? So that's for next year. We had a little surprise coming up. You all enjoyed the show? Sure. Some of you did.
So much.
I'm waiting for someone to show up. Would you like to fill the space? Mike wants to.
Here they are. Here they are. They're here. They're here.
Oh, good. So, one of the things, come on in, guys.
Oh.
One of the things that we do here, what this evening will look like, is we have two presentations. And the first one is the right stuff for someone who has really contributed to the breed and to the Collie. And our honoree tonight is Debbie Holland. She's going to sit here and hear about herself.
I need to go. I need to
Presenter
move.
tonight is Shannon Hayes.
Can she sit somewhere so she can see?
Yeah, you want to watch too.
That was a problem last year for me. When it was right behind me, I couldn't really see it. But,
Experience counts.
yeah.
Come on.
I'm almost afraid of this.
Don't be afraid. We love you.
Now I know why she was asking all the questions.
We're sorry we lied to you. We really are. Oh, yeah. We're really sorry. I need to really thank Russell. He's our technical man. How's it coming? Didn't want to?
It is now.
Oh, good. There you go.
Stefan Murray, was born in Tennessee, but grew up in Texas, just outside of Dallas-Fort Worth in Arlington. As a child, part of her family's regular Saturday activities involved a trip to the library. Debbie would race up the stairs to the second level and all the way to the back shelves. That's where the books on animals live. She would scour those shelves, reading any and all stories that involved horses and dogs. She knew all about the Black Stallion and all about Big Red, and she was set on having an Arabian horse in an Irish setter. Then one day, her eyes landed on a book called Lad and Dog. From this encounter, her world was redirected, and a new and quite permanent path was forged. Through those stories, Albert Hume shared with her, and probably for most of us, the regal, yet humble and sometimes gregarious character of Lad, his big mahogany sable male collie. Thank goodness for libraries and the stories within them that capture and hold our imaginations. At the age of 13, Debbie's first collie, Flash, bounded into her life. He quickly wound his way into her heart, becoming her best friend and confidant. The Flash was from a local puppy mill. In Debbie's 13-year-old lad-obsessed eyes, he was beautiful. Regardless, in those days, she was dead set against show dogs because she thought they had poor temperaments. But for Debbie, Flash was without fault, except for the fact that he was quite unruly and closer to a wild animal than her visions of the Sunny Bank Collies. Thankfully, her mom happened to see an article in the Fort Worth Star-Telegraph about the local 4-H dog training program. And so Flash and Debbie joined 4-H. Thank goodness for 4-H and all the doors it opens for our young people. Debbie worked hard to prepare Flash for the Tarrant County 4-H Dog Show. Twice a day, they trained in obedience and in junior handling. Every day, she patiently groomed him, sometimes making some interesting choices with her trimming, like when she scissored off all the hair hanging from his midsection. As Debbie's 4-H show ring debut approached, excitement grew. She would put Lad through his obedience phases, trying to shape him into her own version of the Sunnybank dogs. But at their very first show, out of 200 possible points in obedience, this team of Debbie and Flash scored a measly 26 points. Feeling disappointed about Flash's obedience performance, the team re-entered the show ring for their first junior showmanship competition, and the duo was victorious. Debbie was named best junior handler, and spoiler alert, that changed her life. Bitten by the dog show bug in 1976, at about 19 years old, she joined the Collie Club of America. Soon after, she moved in with Peggy Conger of Conte Collies to help with the dogs. There, Debbie began doing a little bit of handling and enjoyed some early success, including with the tri-headed white smooth champion Conte Dogtoe Domino, the top-winning white collie in 1981. Debbie co-bred her first litters with Peggy. In 1985, she finished her first bred known champions under the Fantasy Kennel name. Champion Fantasy Diet the Tiger and Champion Fantasy's Here I Am, both roughs. And she finished her first smooths, Champion Fantasy Smooth Escapade and Champion Fantasy Sudden Impact. Debbie was quiet and shy in those early days, and sometimes still quiet and shy today, but she would soak up everything about dog shows like a sponge. And at those shows, Debbie's keen eye began following Guy and Thelma Malden of Kismet Shelties. In Texas, in the 70s and 80s, the Maldens stood out from everyone else. Their dogs were clean and beautifully groomed, then presented to perfection. Debbie started to show up ringside for Shelties to watch the Maldens. From time to time, Guy would even ask her to take a dog back in for winners. Slowly, she got to know them, and occasionally helped out by going to their kennel to let dogs out when they traveled to see family. When fire destroyed Peggy Conver's home, including all of Debbie's possessions, Guy rang up Debbie to see if she wanted a job at his kennel, and she jumped at the opportunity. And with this opportunity, the real foundation was laid for all that was and is to come for Fantasy Collies. Time spent working at Kismet also helped shape some of the other most skilled breeder handlers in our collie community today, including Jenny Rutkus, Matt Stelter, Pete Dumbo, Crystal Stoner, and Debbie Price. At Kismet, the dogs always came first, and there was a commitment to excellence. The kennel was expected to be kept spotless through the work of Debbie's elbow grease. The large number of dogs housed there, both Kismet and Klein owned, were meticulously cared for with a daily schedule of grooming and conditioning. Mornings were early and spent road-working dogs until the hot Texas sun chased them back to the kennel. Wednesdays were spent at the airport where Debbie would arrive early and return late as she received the bitches for that week's breedings. This was the era of Bakery Highborn, Caroline Royal Flush, Philadelphia Kismet Airborne, Kismet Status Quo, and Kismet's Status Symbol. It was a literal candy store of some of the most prominent and influential Sheltie sires of their time. During Debbie's 7.5 years at Kismet, she became well-versed at stud dog management, caring for a large kennel of dogs, whelping and raising puppies, selecting show prospects, proper conditioning for the show ring, and grooming and trimming heads like a piece of art. She became a skilled handler, a fierce competitor in the show ring. At Kismet, her envious instincts for mating selection were honed. Those beautiful Shelties and endless discussions about dog breeding had a major influence on her eye for dogs and her preference for exquisite profiles shaped by a beautiful skull and well-placed stop and soft expression. In 1985, Tartonside presentation with Fitzy had gone winner's dog at the Collie National in Ontario, California. He had been handled by John Buddy. Fitzy was owned by Diane Fitzpatrick, a Boston Collies in Canada. He had earned a reputation for being difficult to show and disliking the show ring. With a desire to finish his championship, John had suggested that Diane should send the dog to an up-and-coming handler named Debbie Holland to see what she could do with the dog. Debbie, as she does, she made a connection with Fitzy, and he loved her, and she was able to pilot him to his championship in 1988. With Fitzy, Debbie applied the same approach she uses and preaches today, and that is, believe in the dog at the end of your lead. Envision the outcome and the perfect performance you want from them. She said about Tartanside's presentation that really all he needed was someone to believe in him again, and she did. As a bonus for guiding Fitzy to his championship, Diane agreed to give Debbie a breeding to one of her dogs. At the '89 National in Colorado, Debbie approached the Alphamont X-Fence, and there she was immediately struck by the soft face and beautiful eye of the handsome champion Alphamont masterpiece, a double grandson of champion Tartanside presentation. Debbie's breeding of a young presentation daughter to her own masterpiece daughter produced. Debbie's breeding of a young Tartanside presentation daughter to her own masterpiece daughter produced champion fantasies true to the master, Abby. Abby was then bred to Fantasy Sculptured in Blue to produce Fantasy's Cover Girl, Cuddles. Then, the breeding of Cuddles to Midnight Edition created the top producing collie of all time. Champion Fantasy's Bronze Talisman, ROM. He's the sire of 183 champions to date, and with the potential to still add to his tally in coming years. He just added champion number 183 last month. Nearly every collie at Fantasy today traces back to these breeds, as well as for so many of the dogs entered international show this week. Around the time Abby was a puppy, Debbie had moved to Indiana, striking out on her own handling career. She had just finished a bitch of raptor male breeding for one of her early clients, Chizuko Kawabata of Japan. Chizuko asked about that dog, asked about purchasing Kawabata. Chizuko asked to purchase a dog that Debbie had acquired through handling champion Asian used Kawabata. After a short business partnership with Julie Mazzabarbo colleagues in Indianapolis in the early 90s, Debbie was able to take the earnings from Sting's sale to Chizuko and purchase a few acres in Center Point, Indiana. That property became today and is still the home of Fantasy Collies. Now, Center Point, Indiana, in my estimation, is not the center of anything. But it did provide a permanent Midwest home that would allow easy travel to and ample options for dog show circuits. And it was a strategic decision to locate about 20 minutes south of Mary Landis of Rainbow Collies. Mary had befriended Debbie a few years earlier, realizing that Debbie's tendency to quietness was misunderstood by many of her peers. The hardworking handler was just shy and nothing more. And as Debbie tells it, Mary would not leave her alone. And never left. Traveling to dog shows nearly every weekend, of course, means you need reliable kennel help back home. And Mary's son Jackson agreed to go work at Fantasy, and he helped build some of the first kennels there. Mary began traveling to shows with Debbie, continuing to exhibit her own successful rainbow collies while assisting Debbie. This collaboration has sustained more than 3 decades. Thank goodness for Mary and all the support she has provided over these many years. And over these decades, there has been tremendous success as well as significant heartache. And as we all know, breeding and showing dogs is not for the faint of heart. But as part of tonight's recognition of devotion and contribution to the collie breed, let's take a look back at some of Debbie's breeding and handling triumphs of the last 30 plus years. And I know this is an incomplete list, and there are a few photos that I couldn't find, so please forgive any errors. It's difficult to fact check something that you're supposed to keep a secret.
I agree.
These records represent a mix of breeder and owner or handler wins. 1995, Reserve Winners Bitch Ladarius Spirit and Spice, handler. Breeder, owner, handler, 96, Best of Winners, Champion Fantasies Dream of Me. Breeder, owner, handler, 97, Best of Winners, Champion Fantasies I'm Shameless. Breeder, co-owner, handler, 98, Reserve Winners Bitch, Champion Fantasies Bomb Keepsake. Breeder, owner, handler, 1998, Winners Dog, Champion Fantasies Fortune and Bronze. Breeder, 1998, Best of Breed, Champion Fantasy Memory Command. Handler, 2006, Best Op to Best of Breed, 2002 and 2001, Best Opposite Sex to Best of Variety, Champion Longacres, Pewter Angel. Handler, 2002 Winners Bitch, Cobble Creek, I'm a Little Star. Handler, 2002 Reserve Winners Dog, Cobble Creek, Hot Damn Here I Am. Owner Handler, 2004 Reserve Winners Bitch, Wayside Norma Jean. Handler, 2004 Best of Winners, Champion Fleur de Lis, Sugar Baby. Co-breeder, 2005 Winners Bitch, Best of Winners, Champion Silhouette, and Rainbow to Die For. owner, 2006 Reserve Winners Dog, Champion Wayside Flying High. Breeder handler, 2007 Winners Dog, Champion Fantasies Buck Naked. Breeder owner handler, 2016 Select Dog, 2010 Best of Breed, 2007 Reserve Winners Dog, Champion Fantasies Rising Dragon. 2008 Breeder, 2008 Best of Winners, Champion Fantasy Rock Ledge Beginning. Co-breeder, 2008 Reserve Winners Bitch, Champion Casey's Cherokee, Chasing a Rainbow. Handler, 2009 Winners Bitch, Best of Winners, Champion Highly Oaks, Perfect Storm, and Caliber. Breeder handler, 2009 Winners Dog, Champion Fantasies, Pleasant Acres Fantasy, Champion Pleasant Acres Fantasy Dragon. Handler, 2011 Best of Winners, Champion Caliber's Key to Fortune. Handler, 2012 Best of Winners, Champion Country View, Broadway Star. Co-breeder, 2017 Select Bitch, 2012 Reserve Winners Bitch, Grand Champion Somewhat, Gallatin, and River Run, Here Comes a Rainbow. Handler, 2013 Best of Winners, Champion Caliber's Filthy Rich. Co-breeder owner, 2014 Best of Winners, Champion Fantasies Hide Your Heart. Breeder owner, 2022 Best Opposite Sex to Best of Variety. 2016 Best of Variety, Champion Fantasy Sunshine Superman. Handler, 2016 Reserve Winners Dog, Champion Fleur-de-lis, JP Great Gatsby. Handler, 2016 Winners Dog, Fleur-de-lis Lightning Strike. Handler, 2021 Reserve Winners Bitch, Champion Tokyo Jazz, JP Bonjour Maxima. Handler, 2022 Best of Winners, Champion Alaric and Cantera's Breathless. Breeder owner, 2022 Winners Dog, Champion Fantasies Look to the Stars. Now, you cannot have great showroom success without great breeding success. And if my estimate is correct and records are up to date, Debbie has bred, owned, or co-owned at least 21 ROM dogs and bitches. 21 ROM dogs and bitches. And they are led by Fantasy Bronze Talisman with 183 champions to date. Grand Champion Fantasies Rising Dragon with 52 champions. Champion Fantasies Finding Fame with 32. Champion Fantasies Fortune Hunter with 27. Fantasies Bronze Sensation with 23. Fantasy Marinere Anchorman with 20. Fantasies Absolute Gold with 11. Go Danny's Asti Spumante with 10. Fantasies Key to My Heart with 10. Fantasies Cover Girl with 9. Fantasies Have Faith with 9. Fantasies True to the Master with 8. Rainbow's One Sassy Fantasy with 8. Sassy's Promises of Fantasy with 8. Bellevue's Caramel Kiss with 7. Fantasies Delta Blues with 7. Fantasies Finders Keepers with 7. Fantasies Garden Party 7. Fantasies Hot Fudge 7. Wayside Party Favor 7. And the latest, just a few weeks ago, Champion Fantasies 1,000 Stars with 7. Now, along with Debbie's breeding program success and the success of her clients, she has long been a teacher at heart, passing on some of her many learnings through seminars in all corners of the U.S. She is a past and longtime member of Collie Club of America's Breeders' Education Committee, and she has presented at several seminars in Japan on behalf of her longtime clients, Shizuko and Sally. Debbie has also given of her time over many years to help ensure the success of our National Dog Show by serving as grooming chairperson and taking on the often challenging dog of coordinating and juggling all the endless location-related requests. There are, of course, more stories I could tell about our endless adventures over the years. And of more of each of these dogs. They each have their own special story as well. But this is the Collie National, and we have some dogs we're really excited to show to Larry and to all of you tomorrow. And I know Debbie is anxious to get back to work and make sure they're all perfect. But I want to leave you with one last story. For this story, we'll go back near the beginning to learn about Debbie's source of resilience and her favorite place. As a teenager, when she and Flash, her first collie, would become frustrated over training challenges, Debbie would regroup and strategize on how she would overcome. Heading back to her parents' house, the tall, scrawny teenager would stretch out the length of their couch, open up one of Terhun's books, and read and reread the stories while munching on pecan sandies. Washing down the cookies with cold milk, she would get lost over and over again in those stories about the place and about the capers of the Sunny Bank Collies. No matter the reason for the frustration, losing herself in those stories would always make everything okay again. For decades now, every August she turns into the drive at Sunny Bank in Wayne, New Jersey. Her van usually loaded with young show prospects. When she turns down that driveway, gear around her lifts, the chimes hanging in her rearview mirror jingle softly and welcome. As she arrives at the place, the picture she carries in her head at the Terhun Collies, of collies bounding across the lawn, swirling up from the banks of the lake. Those are witnessed in full dimension in her imagination once again. Each visit there is a time for her to reflect on the dogs that have forever entangled themselves in her heart. Like Brandon, Cuddles, Louie, Kent, Nate, Mackenzie, and so many, many more. She drinks in the goodness of just being there at Sunny Bank and stores up a little of the place's magic to help carry her and her collie family, both two and four-legged, safely through the Country's adventures in the show ring and the loving dogs, and sometimes on the other side of the world in Japan. So once upon a time, there was a girl named Debbie who loved collies. Though we didn't get to talk much about them this evening, she also loves horses and habinees and cats and goats and all kinds of birds. But she really, really loves collies. Well, this is the end of the story for this evening. In so many ways, it's still only the beginning of Debbie's story and her everlasting impact on our beloved collie breed. Thank you.
Family and friends. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shannon. That was really wonderful. Thank you. Next, we are really privileged to induct two remarkable people into the Hall of Fame. And Mike Esch has volunteered to present them because he actually knew them in his childhood. Mike, would you like to speak while Russell is working out the kinks here?
That's the first picture.
Okay. Here you are.
So why did everybody laugh when he asked me to say something? I don't get it. So tonight we have the honor of introducing two ladies Virginia, Holtz that everybody knew by Jenny, right? And Joan Graver into the quarter-century Collie Group Hall of Fame. I first met them when I was 14 years old. My hair was down to here, and I weighed about half what I weigh today. And my first recollection, when my dad and I first started, we were thinking about, I was the one pushing to say what we should go into Smooths. And I remember the first time we drove up to their place in Wisconsin. Everybody called them the girls, and that's what they were known by. And I remember driving up to Tanglewood the first time and going up that driveway, thinking, boy, this just looks like the old farmhouse back home. And we get up to the end, and there it is, and it's the old farmhouse with all the dogs. First time in my life I've seen over 50 dogs in a kennel. Back then, a lot of places had 50 dogs. A lot of places sometimes had 75 dogs. Okay? That was back in the late 60s, 68, 69. And it really was truly a collie heaven to me. Kind of like Debbie, you know, growing up and reading about dogs, but, you know, we used to have the old mutt. But it was really kind of fun to sit there. We started with Ross, and we had bought some dogs out of Mrs. Sturm, Lick Creek. But really going into the Smooths was something unique for us. Joan and Ginny, when they were together, really had their own breeding programs, and they rarely, but they did every once in a while combine the two lines. But for the most part, they were reasonably separate. They were bred along similar lines, but were actually distinctively separate. Early on, Ginny branched out to include smooth collies in her breeding program, and equally, Joan over time branched out into Westies. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. If you knew Ginny and Joan, they were opposites in nature. Ginny, I remember, was always quiet and composed and willowy. She always had this gentleness to her. She always wore longer dresses, and she was always very, very elegant. I never saw her flustered, never saw her upset. Joan, on the other hand, was a bustling, take-charge sort of person. Boy, she felt she was always right. And honestly, in my experience, most of the time she was right. I remember the second year of my presidency, and Joan told me that I was doing everything wrong on some stuff, which was fine. I needed to get whipped up a little bit. Both were astute and very popular judges. Ginny was content with just collies and juniors, and Joan decided she wanted to do almost all the breeds. She did many of the herding breeds, all the terrier breeds, ended up doing best in show judging, and she had a lot of experience of that. And equally, it's kind of amazing to me when you talk about people like Debbie Holland and Ginny Holtz and Joan Graver. They were all intimately involved, both the girls, in breeders' ed committees, and as well show rules, which was Joan's thing for many, many years. If you don't know, you should all go back and look at the 2006 yearbook, because Ginny wrote a great article on color inheritance, and it's really, really good about, at a time when, I think it was actually a revision of what she'd done earlier. It was really amazing what she knew and she was communicating to everybody. Matter of fact, I don't think probably too many people know. It was interesting talking to the superintendent today, because he said, how did you ever get approval not to bring all your specials into the ring? Joan was the person who got that through AKC. Okay? And I remember back in early 2000, she was every year battling with AKC to allow us to do that. So if you can imagine bringing a couple hundred dogs in the ring just to check them in, and then they could leave. Well, Joan was the one who worked that out. And a lot of the way we run the National today came from the work that Joan did back in the late 1990s. So let's get into more detail about Joan. She was born in 1932, grew up in Brookfield, Wisconsin. She was a registered nurse for 30 years in the Mendota Mental Health Institute training department. She bought her first collie in 1953. She and Ginny started a partnership breeding and showing collies in the middle 50s, They moved to Madison in '56 and eventually in '60 to their farm known as Tanglewood. Her first collie in 1956 was Judy Ann's Shining Star, who was really from the Sterling line, and she was bred to many of the Viley males descending down from Silver Hope Parader. 3 generations later, she produced a litter that is very important in collie history. She bred her bitch, Rue-Ray's Shield Brie, to Ginny's champion Culmore's Conspirator and had 4 puppies. Ginny's choice of the litter became champion Culmore's Highland Holly. That's the one on the left. She went to Gene and Carol Chapman and really jump-started the Hanover breeding program by producing 4 champions, including champion 2J's Hanover Enterprise. We're on one of the breed's top sires. And the left, center, is the one that Joan kept, champion Rue-Ray's Gabe Wenning, who finished at 10 months of age. Gwyneth won a lot of winning back in the day, and is still considered, I think, one of the truly beautiful collie bitches of all time. Here she is with John Lindeman, and here she is with Les Canada. This is Joan in the ring with one of her bitches at the National. About 1962, she began breeding West Highland White Terriers and joined the Western Pairing Club in 1969. She won several times Best of Breed Owner Handler at the Westie National. She served on their board. She chaired their Judges Education Committee. She co-wrote their first illustrated standard and was their yearbook editor for 5 years. She also judged their national 2 years, in 1986 and 2000. So really kind of an interesting mixture that you could be kind of very prominent in one breed and also equally prominent in another breed. She started judging in the early 70s. She was voted and judged the CCVA in both 1989 and 2003, both times judging intersex. And in addition, in the latter one, she judged juniors in 2003. In 1989, I'm sure everybody recognizes this dog. Champion Joe Press Liberty Legend, Best of Breed in CCVA in 1989. And then her best out that year was champion Trojan's Liberated Lady. In 2003, her best of breed was champion Belvern's Top Gun. And the best out the best of breed that year was champion Blossom Hill's Full Circle. So for more than 5 decades, kind of like what you heard earlier about Debbie, she was a breeder, exhibitor, judge, and just a tireless club worker. She joined the Collie Club of Southern Wisconsin in '54. She held every office in the club. She was the district director at the CCVA, co-chaired the Judge and Breeder Education Committee, chaired the CCVA Show Rules Committee, and served as chair of the Judges Ed Committee. She was also show chair for her local Albany club, the Badger Kennel Club. I always find it interesting that kind of the icons of the breed that we always talk about, they don't just always just show dogs. They're also very intimately involved in the club. They either join committees and over time learn to actually run those committees. And that's their opportunity, I think, to pass on all their knowledge to all of us. And I think we should all appreciate that. But I think you could argue, you could see that Joan's done an awful lot for the club. I remember when we started doing that first round of show rules, and it's amazing how much she put into that and got us where we are today. So let's talk about Ginny next. She was a longtime breeder, exhibitor, and educator. She was really, her Smooth Collie breeding program was instrumental in establishing the Smooth Collie in the country. I remember the first show I went to, and I was looking at some of the dogs that were bred in the early 60s, and they were needing some help. It was different. And I don't know how many people know that we actually used to have an American Smooth Collie Association group. Okay? And back then, the idea was we never want to breed smooths to roughs because the roughs will contaminate the smooth. And you know, it's the exact same thing when we started doing herding. I remember a lot of people said, oh, we don't need, you know, this beauty and brains thing. Beauty and working dogs just don't go together. And I think we've all learned over time that's not true. Just by looking at the versatility dogs, and the number of dogs that you see in the ring, there's a lot of great working collies. But during a period of time, you know, it's not always believed to be that way. She's actually one of the very few collie breeders to be involved in the development of both of the varieties that we see today. She received her undergraduate and master degree in library science. Few people know that she had a long and distinguished career in the library science field and was named Library of the Year in the state of Wisconsin. Really, if you read her CV, you would be amazed by what this person did outside of the dog world. She loved gardening and remodeling a house and going to the theater. But she started with collies in 1956 with the purchase of the bitch Sunnymar Pleasantville Gem from Dr. Borman of Mad Acre Collies, who was in wealth to his sire. From that litter came Colmore's Milady Frolic, her first point winner, and the foundation for the Colmore Rough Breeding Program. Deciding that she really wanted to base her breeding program more on the sons of Silverhope Prater. I mean, let's face it, we are in the Midwest. And back in the 60s, most of the dogs in the Midwest were very, very heavily driven by Steve Fields and Prater collies. They were the dominant force through the 50s, and a lot of people bred to them. And she found that the best possible source at the Tecumseh Kennels owned by John Lindeman. So she bred Colmores in 1958, Milady Frolic to Tecumseh Tempter, who was a Silverhope Prater son, and produced one of Ginny's all-time favorites, and by far her most famous rough collie, the red mahogany dog champion Colmore's Conspirator, called name Brutus, or Brew, how most people knew the dog. This is a picture of Conspirator and Morrison, or Ralph Morrison, and it says here as obviously one of the founders of the quarter-century collie breed. By the time Brew was 6 months old, though immature in coat and body, he had a lovely head, was developed, and he finished with 3 majors at the age of 2. He was shown sparingly as a special. I think, you know, if you haven't seen this picture, you should think about it. This is where he won the stud dog class at the 1963 National, and that day he had 6 of his get in the ring with him. What makes it truly amazing is of that 6, 2 of them are very, very famous collies. One is the champion Roudray's Gate Gwyneth, and the second one is a dog who 2 years later would have their first best of breed, and then 2 years later another best of breed at the CCFA National, champion Clown Prince of Floraville. So can you imagine walking into a stud dog class with one of your get, a future 2-time best of breed winner? Pretty amazing, right? Brew was the leading sire throughout the 60s because he blended so well with many of the Prater offshoots. He became known far and wide for both his rough and smooth, but he really helped to establish some future collie families, many who probably are in the back pedigrees of most of the people in this room. Early on, Brew seemed to blend well with champion Cherryville Darminute offspring. But ultimately, his greatest influence came from crosses from champion Prater's Country Squire, or their close descendants. The most famous product of the cross was champion 2J's Hanover Enterprise, who was sired by Country Squire out of a brood daughter, Colmore's Highland Holly, owned by the Chapmans, and Enterprise went on to produce 49 champions. But equally well, the reverse worked. So you could take, instead of a Conspirator son, in this case, in this picture, champion Arrowhill, Oklahoma Tornado, out of a Country Squire daughter, champion Arrowhill Be Beautiful, And Tornado produced sire for 8 champions and is another 8 CCA winner behind many current families. But you also may not realize if you were to look back, way back in Debbie's, because I remember when Debbie came on the scene, I remember getting some pedigrees from her. He is multiple times behind champion Twin Cricks 2 Grit, and many, many times behind champion Fantasy Bronze Talisman. Other famous rough champions get sired by Brew, including the earlier mentioned Florbell Prince of Florbell, is also Perfect Gentleman and champion Liquid Riptide. When it was all said and done, this beautiful headed red sable dog sired 26 champions, 20 rough and 6 smooth, earning him a Rob designation. One of the interesting things about Brew, and for those of you, if you really go back in your pedigrees, you'll find Brew, almost every Midwest collie has him somewhere in there, is that he was actually sold as a pet. He was 10 weeks old, and he was sold as a pet for $50. Yeah, true story. 5 months later, people who bought him as a pet called Jenny up and said, "We can't keep the dog around anymore. Would you be willing to take him back?" She did, but she said, "Well, I need to look at him first to make sure he's still feeling, working well, and he looks good." So she saw him and she brought him back, and the rest is history. It really goes to show sometimes it's all about fate, right? You just never know. There's so many stories you can find about a dog that you just didn't like, and then they end up becoming the cornerstone of somebody's breeding program. When Ginny started in Smooths, she really, her involvement began with a very early smooth breeder, Tom Kilcullen, not to be confused with Cohen, of Evanwood Collies. In 1958, Ginny decided she wanted a puppy from a very famous bitch, champion Belmont Bambi. Not only was Bambi the best smooth around, but she traced back to the original breedings done by Margaret Hazard of Pebble Edge Collies. Bambi won 5 working group placements, and she defeated the Rust several times. How many people remember the days when collies were in the working group and not in the herding group? So you can imagine what it is going up over the working group back then, which was a huge group of dogs and a lot of competition. Her granddam, this dog on Bambi, was actually champion Pebble Ridge Bambi, the first smooth champion CCA in 38 years. Part of the issue back then is very, very few smooths were around. So it was very hard to get points. So when Tom let Ginny raise a litter from Bambi, the Colmore breeding program was born. Sired by the Best in Show winning rough champion Belshanti Belfont, who was a line bred Hazel Jane's Bright Future, the litter produced Ginny's first 2 smooth champions. Champion Colmore's Babette of Evanwood called Bubbles, and champion Colmore's Kilcullen of Evanwood named Tom, named after Tom Kilcullen. Bubbles went on to go Best of Variety at the 1959 National, and Tom went Best of Variety Smooth at the 1960 National. Ginny was the first really rough breeder of note to develop a smooth breeding program in the United States. In 1959, Ginny released another Bambi daughter from Tom and bred her to champion Colmore's Kilcullen of Evanwood, making it a double up on Bambi, and produced Colmore's Del Molly, who hated the show but was a great producer. She was bred to Conspirator and produced the lovely CCA winner, champion Colmore's Colpernia, which is Brew's first litter, smooth litter. One of Ginny's smooth sires, best smooth sires, and a top winner during the 70s, was a dog named champion Colmore's Bow Street Runner, called with Dorothy Cannon. He was a tri dog, whelped in 68, one of the sire 15 champions. You saw Bow Street Runner on a lot of shows in the Midwest back in that period of time. So for bitches, champion Colmore's Breckenridge Shaw stands out. She was a Blue Merle. She was one of Ginny's top producing dams with 11 champions. She was also the dam of one of Ginny's favorite, a tricolor male named champion Colmore's the Maltese Falcon, sired by champion Black Hawk of the Sand. Ginny had the honor of judging the national three times, bitches in 82, dogs in 89, and then bitches in 90. As I quote her, she says as a judge, "Faulty expression is a reasonably reliable predictor for lack of merit in head structure, especially in stop and eye, and a good expression is the final test of the quality of the headpiece. Good expression is the best test of proper head structure." And I think in a lot of ways, that is the way it's true. You know, we say, why don't we don't like the expression on dog? It always goes back to there's something wrong with the head structure, right? Either the eye set, or the head's too wide, or the, raised over the eyes, or whatever. And really, just to her, it was all about expression. So here she is with Ginny awarding the Rough Winner's Bitch at the 82 CC of A to Starberry Belle of Georgia, out of Heaven Over a Flaming Legend, with, looks like Bob on the end of the leash. Bob. Here is Ginny's Smooth Winner's Bitch at the 82 CC of A, Kurt High Tide. Mila's Step Aside, who's Winner's Dog at the 89 CC of A under Ginny. Mylan, sorry. Okay.
M-I-L-E-N.
Okay, so who gave me the paper? Okay, sorry about that. Here is Oak Hill with Sensation, Smooth Winner's Dog at the 89 CC of A. And then here is Overland Summer Rain, Rough Winner's Bitch at the 99 CC of A, who was out of Bronze Talisman. And then in this picture, we have Donovan's Touched by an Angel, who are Smooth Winner's Bitch, Best of Winners at the 99 CC of A under Jenny. You know, in retrospect, you could think about Ginny's value was probably twofold. One is being smart enough to take Brew back when she sold him. And the second thing was really knowing how to breed him and start a lot of what we see today as modern day smooths. By the time Ginny was done, she had bred 56 champions and 53 of them were smooths. Which a lot of people didn't realize. So kind of in closing, I want to tell something. I sit in my office every day at home, probably too much in my office, as my wife would say. And on my right, I always see Joan, because I have a picture of Joan up on the wall, when she gave my son Best Junior at a national. So I see her every day of my life. And on the left side of the wall, I see an award won by my first smooth, who happened to go Best of Ride at a national. And when I was preparing for this, I actually did the plaque is of her 7 pedigree on the plaque. Every one of those dogs that I mentioned tonight are on her pedigree. So I have a real tie, as this is the lady who really started me personally in smooths, and I think was very instrumental in a lot of people's programs. So, both the women were experts in their own rights, right? Both of them gave time to the breed and time and dedication. Both gave a lot to the breed and time and dedication. And I think we'd all agree both are welcome into our Hall of Fame. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. That was great. Okay, well, we're a little early this time. This is a first, but when I was watching the judging today with the smooths, and there were 100 specials, it took me back. I really started to think about what it was like when I was a kid and what it was like with the smooths. There were so few that there were breeders, a handful of breeders, and unless they got together and decided, let's all go to Devon, Pennsylvania or somewhere, there were no points. Not only that, the rough breeders at that time would refuse to breed the smooth bitches. And I lived on Long Island, and there were a lot of good rough stud dogs. And I met some people named the Ackermans. They were wonderful people who were really pioneers in smooths on the East Coast. And they couldn't get their bitches bred because they weren't acceptable. The first breeder who accepted their bitches was Edith Levine. And from there, eventually, it became pretty commonplace to breed the smooths to the roughs. And at that time, the Brandwin dogs were very active, and Trudy did breed the bitches, and they were champions by Echo and tomfoolery and that kind of thing. But when I think back, Ginny Holtz, what she did was so remarkable because there was the Smooth Collie Association, but the breeders there were breeders on the West Coast, the Glengyle Smooths, and there were a few breeders on the Eastern Seaboard. But there was a Margaret Hasserod who was so interested in the smooth variety. And it took her years to actually get viable smooths that she could breed together to have litters. And she started the Smooth Collie Association. And this woman was a wealthy woman. Did you know her, Mike? Mm-hmm. She actually they would have a convention every few years for the smooth breeders. And she would pay the airfare for those breeders to come, and they have a conference, and a lot of times they take their dogs with them and they compare them, and it was really a building process. And so then when you think about maybe in the late 60s, there might be 5 smooths at the National, maybe. And then today, when there were 100 specials, you know, we owe those people like Ginny Holtz such a debt of gratitude. It's just amazing. Well, since we're in the building and we're have a full day tomorrow, I invite you to stay and visit, socialize. And anybody have anything they want to say? All right, on that note, I'll say good night. And you can groom your dogs and get ready for tomorrow or hang out here. Thank you very much for coming.